You're here tonight to hear other things about animals in the wild, and you hear about tracking. The stories left by our non-human neighbors are visible in the snow, and you can learn to read the snow. You can learn to figure out what happened, who did what, how this affects you, and where to look, and questions to ask, and how to identify tracks. Kirsten Welge is a volunteer with the Minnesota Wildlife Tracking Project. She's led teams for wildlife track surveys and for trailing practices since 2016. She's got a level 3 certification in wildlife track and sign identification and trailing through Cybertracker International. You may remember that Kirsten arranged for a presentation with an internationally known tracking expert a couple of months ago, and she's presented for us in the past. So welcome, Kirsten. We're really excited to hear this.
Awesome. And I'm glad to be back, Fran, especially hearing everything y'all have planned for the winter. So it sounds amazing. And hopefully this will equip you with even more to look out for when you're out snowshoeing and camping. So let me go ahead and get this set up. And if y'all can just give me a thumbs up when you see that title page. Everyone see that? Awesome. Okay. And setting up that view. Any changes, or can you still see that entire slide? Perfect. Okay. And just a heads up. So if you were on the presentation I originally did a couple years back, earlier in the pandemic, I would be utterly delighted for y'all to interact. So this is not a save your questions till the end. This will be interactive. And I'd love for y'all to interact. So with that said, there's no tracking like snow tracking. Here we go. So the first question that might be good to ask is, what is tracking? Well, one of our most eminent tracker scientists in the field, Mark Elbrock, says, animal tracking involves identifying and interpreting animal tracks and signs, as well as following subtle signs of wild creatures over varied terrain. Tracking is about finding animals. And as such, with any discipline within nature, tracking can be a vast and complex art. One apt analogy is that tracking is another language. Our goal is to read the landscape like we read the morning paper. So thinking about this analogy then, you might say that learning the alphabet and words is our species track identification, the basic, who is that? Domestic dog, domestic cat, why are they out in the snow? Or corvid, or grouse, or opossum. Along with this, we also want to pick up the different forms. So in language, that would be print, cursive, and signature. That might be the partial tracks and the way that different animals' feet register on different substrates, if we're talking tracking. We can then also consider, what does the sentence structure look like? And I think that gets us into what's the front and what's the hind, which you might hear us asking if you ever come to a tracking club, which plays directly into what's the track pattern? How is this animal moving along the landscape? What can we draw in terms of inferences about the gait? Which then plays into the next piece, picking up on what was the animal's intent with the modifiers that you see. Generally, the behavioral sign. Are there dens? Is there feeding happening here? Is there scent marking? And my favorite, is there stat? And thinking about this a little more, you might also say, you might start noticing dialects if you study this long enough, regional presentations of particular animals. So for instance, red squirrels out in Wisconsin, turns out, are a little bit smaller than they are right here in the cities. And then finally, just as with learning any language, practice often to become familiar and fluent in the language of the land. The good news is, all you have to do to practice is to go right outside your front door. And then the final piece of this, share the story of the trail. So a note about the substrate. So as I say, there's no tracking like snow tracking. It can be an absolute delight. With fresh light snow, everything is a track. You get to see where these animals are moving. So for instance, on the left, this is my mother-in-law's steps here in Matt Groveland. And you can see both my footprint, but also a little gray squirrel that is bounded up the stairs and is checking out her little conifer there for anything that it can nibble on before leaping off the other side. In the middle here, you see a vast array of small mammal tracks just making a highway across a light coating of snow on the sidewalk between two stands of tall grasses. And then over on the right, peering under some conifers, beautiful little bird tracks, possibly junco, but where you can clearly see where they were hopping around and what they were feeding on. So it's astonishing. And it can also be a right terror. For instance, welcome to College Park. You can clearly see that dogs and humans have been out there. It can be kind of challenging to then go out and try to follow a vole trail around because everything stays. Or good luck seeing it. You might think that snow should register everything, but if you take a look by that ruler, all you can see are 4 different divots. If you look ahead on that trail, you'll notice where the wolf's prints register. That's a 120-pound mammal. For comparison, you'll also see my muckluck tracks over to the right of the ruler. That's a 150-pound mammal. It looks like it ought to register. It doesn't, and that can really send you sideways. With snow, you also end up with melt out. So in this example, which way is this canid going? Good luck finding which way the toes are. Sometimes they melt out enough that it's hard to see. And then finally, what toes? Sometimes if you end up with a crust, you end up with breakthrough. And that's when you really hope that you remember your track patterns and your stride lengths. There's a lot of air shaping for how large is this animal. So it can be a wide array of different substrates and different presentations. But as ever, regardless of substrate, tracking is both science and storytelling. We begin by gathering data and asking questions to start forming the story. What happened here? Who was involved? And as we go, we keep testing that story against other evidence that we find, and we update it as needed. And then we tell the story to other trackers, both to share and to learn from their experiences as well. So the peer review aspect. But let's begin by learning the tracking alphabet. So for today, I only get about 40 minutes. And so we'll be focusing on mammals you'll see in the snow. But even then, it's a wide array. So this is going to be a very light view. But of course, remember, it's not just the mammals making tracks right now. I've seen corvids and turkeys and other songbirds leaving tracks in the snow. But let's do a brief review of some of these families you're likely to see around here. And remember, the nice thing is animals from the same family often will show similar features. So you can often figure it out if you have a sense of what these look like. So let's start. And here's where the interaction begins. So the question about these two is, which family do these critters belong to? And feel free to unmute yourself and sing out.
On the left, is that a rabbit, whatever?
Oh, that's a great question. Why would you say rabbit?
I wondered if that was hopping steps. I don't know.
Excellent. No, that's great. Jeannie, right? Or Jeanne?
Jeannie.
Jeannie, excellent. Yes, so you're picking up on the bound. So, and I realized I didn't tell you about the scale. That tracking card is about 3 inches long. So that trail is about 1 inch wide. It's a little bit small for a rabbit, right? But you're spot on in terms of the movement. So what's smaller that bounds?
Squirrel.
Very good. But keep going.
A mouse.
Even this would be small for a squirrel. And then you said?
A mouse.
Perfect. Nailed it. All right. And so as a community, we come to consensus. Awesome. So yes, on the left, these are mouse trails, most likely deer mouse, but house mouse do look quite similar if you can't see the pads on the bottom of the feet. Is that the same or different from what we're seeing on the right?
Different, maybe.
It is different. Well done, Greg. How's it different?
It seems like bigger feet, and they drag the animal drag their feet a little bit.
Very nice. Awesome. All right. Yeah. So on the right, so those larger footprints that you see, and can you actually see my arrow on the screen or no?
No, I don't
Dang.
think.
Okay. All right.
Oh
I'll
wait,
try-
yeah, there it is. Actually, I see
Yeah.
it now.
We can
Yeah, I
see
see
it.
it now.
Wonderful. Thanks, y'all. All right. So if you see these larger footprints that Greg's pointing out, right, and kind of like the vast majority of these that are forming kind of this highway in the middle here, these are vole tracks, also known as field mice. Okay. So they're trotting along through, have kind of diagonal pattern. And then what about these tiny ones? Any guesses? We're on the real small end of mammals in Minnesota these days. All right.
I'll go with shrew.
Very nice. Yep, exactly right. So here we have the very dainty bounding tracks of a shrew moving through. So our options, getting very nerdy about this. We've got 3 different shrews kicking around here. Cinereus, so the masked shrew, as well as the short-tailed shrew, Blarina, and then there's the really tiny one, Cryptotus. But this one I think would be masked shrew based on the width of the trail. But dainty little shrew bounds, very nicely done. Awesome. So yeah, so forgive me, I did do a trick question out of the gate because these are different families. They're shrews and murids, so the mice and the voles. And for what it's worth, it can be challenging to distinguish these smaller critters. I'd say for beginners, if you're seeing tiny footprints with a less than 1.5 inch trail width from outer edge to outer edge, you're in this realm, small mammal. It's helpful to recognize them, at least at a glance, like, oh yeah, that's a shrew or a mouse, so that when you see them around your home in the snow, you don't accidentally confuse them for the toes of a larger pawed animal. If you want a really funny YouTube about that, Google cougar in Canada that showed up on a snowy balcony of an apartment 3 stories up. Hint, it's not actually a cougar, it's a squirrel. So, but moving along. Nicely done. All right, try your hand at this one. Which family is this critter?
The raccoon.
Oh, excellent hypothesis. Why would you say raccoon?
Oh, because it looks like a larger, almost like a hand.
Yeah, the bottom ones kind of do, don't they? And the one on the left. But I will say that the tracks in this, in all 3 pictures are the same species. And does the upper right one look like raccoon? Does that look hand-like? Yeah. And the other question would be, do raccoons often move in a bound? Because that's what we're seeing here, right? It's like the larger version of the mouse.
Rabbit?
Well done, Quentin. Exactly right. This is our local leopard, the eastern cottontail. So next time you go out on a walk around your yard or around the sidewalks, I encourage you to take a look around because these are everywhere. They're one of the easiest tracks to really get your eye on fast, which then helps you distinguish them from other things like raccoon. So the cottontail collage here, generally you'll see a track bound of a bound or a hop. Each one of these here is a bound. Your hinds, which show up in front of the front. So let's see if my cursor will show up. So the hinds are the ones that are landing out here and are typically parallel. And generally what you see are these, just like at the top on these 2 photos, are pointed kind of flame shape or egg shaped track impressions. Although as you can see on the bottom, the feet can splay. Nice bonus on the bottom right here is a nice little leaving. So we have sign to help confirm, yep, that's a rabbit track. It's a nice little Skittle-sized pellet. So continuing the track alphabet review, who are these from? Which family do these folks belong to?
Canine.
Yes, nailed it, Allison. Awesome. All right. So here we have our canids. Moving forward. So we have on the left, we have coyote here. That's the one in snow that's a bit melted out, going towards the right. In the same photo, towards the top by the tracker mentoring ruler, going left, we have a double register of a wolf. So nice little size comparison there. Both of those were in Wisconsin. The middle lower one that has the partial print of the hind, that's also a wolf, again, quite large. Moving to the right, the one that's next to the finger of my glove is a red fox. Note how much less distinct the toes are here because the red fox feet are so furred. And then finally, over on the right, we have domestic dog. So nice, like kind of almost round shape with some of these what are called cat-footed dogs. It's based on the structure of their foot. We've bred them so differently that they can look like coyote, look like wolf, or look like little round cat-footed dogs. So you'll see a wide range of domestic dogs on your sidewalks this time of year. Also a really good track to learn. Key characteristics of your wild canids, though, the toe area is going to be much greater in terms of the surface area than your palm pads. You can actually see this on that set of wolf tracks in the center here, where the front registers fully, but the hind, it's those two inner toes that register. The pad on the hind does not. And then that track shape, generally box shaped for your coyote or for wolf, to kind of an egg shape for red fox. Okay. All right. Continuing the alphabet review.
I have a question.
Yes.
The wolf, is that something about their gait of why their hinds don't register as much in the snow?
Great question, Twyla. It's less about the gait and more about the weight that that part of the body is carrying. If you think about a dog or a wolf, and you think about, you just like picture it in your mind. If you think about the amount of weight that the fronts are carrying, that's the head, that's the chest and the organs that are there. And then if you think about the hind, which comes at an angle as well, that classic dog leg, that's carrying just really the rear carriage, right? You know, it's the bum and the tail. So you've got a lot more weight that's falling on the front feet. So those are the more likely to register in terms of the entire print. Make sense?
Yep, thanks.
Absolutely. Great question. All right. So taking a look at these photos, who are these folks? Which family?
Are these the raccoons?
Oh, great guess, Caitlin. Yeah, but actually, no. I will say raccoon and opossum are the two not appearing in this presentation. Kick myself for that now. But raccoons can appear in so many different ways. It's always a really good option to consider. And in fact, in the tracking club, often one of the first things that we say is, it's raccoon until proven otherwise. So
Amazing.
yeah, but it's a great question. And actually, but let's see what we can do in terms of size to see if we can rule out raccoon, right? If we take a look at that middle set of tracks, how large is that lowest track right there? Like how long is it?
2 centimeters?
Yeah. It's maybe an inch, right?
These are squirrels then. Are they squirrels?
They are in fact squirrels. Yep, exactly. And so just a couple notes real quick. Raccoon morphology, 5 toes on the front, 5 toes on the hind. Usually the fronts, the classic presentation, will look like a human hand. The hinds look a bit like human footish, a bit, if the heels register. They tend to be about 2 inches and larger. And they tend to also be They can bound. I've actually seen one once, and I've seen a track pattern once, but it's quite rare. They tend to conserve energy, and so you'll often usually see the classic pattern of what I call mitten boot right next to each other, and boot mitten. So they have this kind of exaggerated pace walk. But maybe I'll get into gaits next time I talk with y'all. So that'll be fun. But yes, so what we have right here are the squirrels. So taking a look at our squirrels here, the sciurids, on the left, we actually have an example of a red squirrel from northern Wisconsin. So I mentioned that the ones out in northern Wisconsin are a bit smaller than the ones that we have here. But you can kind of see it's super dainty. It's really fingery. And they're quite small compared to the chunky gray squirrels that we got in the center and on the right here. So the center, you can kind of see that you know, it's larger, it's chunkier. You can see the pads better. And then on the far right, here's an example of squirrels going out and back in the Fort Snelling parking lot a couple of years back in the winter. So classic bound patterns of squirrels. All right. And then, as I mentioned, it's good to know the different variations, just like, you know, you start out learning your block printing, and then you start learning cursive, and eventually maybe you learn how to decipher signatures. So a few different variations of squirrels because they are so common on the landscape. On the left, anyone know what this is? It's kind of uncommon right around here, although you'll see it a bit further north of the cities and certainly in the North Woods. If you see a squirrel print in the snow and then it goes bounding off and it's like feet away from the next tree, odds are you found the sitz mark of a flying squirrel. And so that's what we're seeing here. This is actually at Cedar Creek in East Bethel, just about 40 minutes north of my house. So a nice little glide in and right on top of that little cord right there. And then you can see it moving off towards the top of the photo. On the far right, you can see, again, a squirrel that is actually breaking through the snow. So even though it's quite a light animal, it's breaking through bound after bound after bound. What can help you distinguish that from rabbit is, do you see how there's kind of like this hourglass that come, like there are lines that come into each print and then come out and wider from each one of those prints. Do y'all see this in the snow? This is from the hinds coming around as the animals is pushing off, okay? So they're landing with the fronts, the hinds sweep around, land in front of the fronts, and push off to elevate the animal and have them do that sinusoid and bound through the snow. And then finally, so even though squirrels you'll usually see in bounding, sometimes you'll actually see them walking. I regularly see gray squirrels around here walking as they're foraging. So as they're, you know, walking around your yard, digging up a cache. So oftentimes you'll see the front foot that has those four toes and the nice clear carpal pads at the back will be partially obliterated by that hind track, which has the three toes together. And then those really large kind of wedge or keystone shaped that arch of keystone shaped metacarpal pads, metatarsal pads. Okay. All right. Oh, yes. And then bounds don't always happen with the fronts and then the hinds showing up in front. Sometimes they're on top of each other. So an example of this. All right. So I did promise this would be interactive. So let's say y'all are out walking with me. We go outside my door here in Matt Groveland, and we look down and we say, oh, hey, partial prints. Who's here? Let's read the sidewalk together. So how many species and which species do you see on the sidewalk here?
Dog and squirrel.
Excellent.
Human.
Yes. Don't forget the humans. It's important. Yes. Well done, Allison. So just, you know, kicking around fun here. So taking a look, I'm kind of thinking 3 to 4 humans. Occasionally I'll have fun and try to follow track patterns of humans if there's nothing else going, because might as well, right? It's all practice. And so just goofing around, it looks like there might be, one down here. It looks like there's one that has those grid lines there, a bit of a kind of a curve, and like almost looks like pine beetle marks there. And then maybe another one here. So maybe 3 to 4 humans. But yes, Allison, absolutely right. We got a domestic dog. Nice toes right there. Nice nail marks heading to the left of the picture. And then right up here, we've got, looks like, front and then a hind. So probably a bound that's just obliterated by this other older dog track. So well done. Thanks for reading the earth with me. And let's say we continue on to the park. Looks like some kids have been sledding down this hill. And hey, there are these 4 impressions right there. So partial print practice. Who's this?
Is it a coyote or wolf?
Ah, excellent. So what we have here is actually a domestic dog. This was actually, if we're thinking about in the cities, wolf is not really on the roster. Coyote ought to be, because they definitely move around here. Ask anyone on next door in Highland Park, Merriam Park, or my neighborhood. In this case, you can actually call it as domestic dog. So taking a close look here, you can actually see these really clear, distinct, kind of stout nail marks that precede each one of those toes in kind of that boxy arc. Yeah. And then always, I recommend always look back and forth along your trail as well. See if you can find any other tracks that are the same age, that look about the same age. And as we look back, there's one more over here. And then there's one that really registers. So the funny part here is without that nice triangular palm pad registering for this dog, the friend that I was with when I took this picture actually cued in on those 4 marks and said, "Oh, is that a squirrel?" And then as she took a look and took in the trail, she said, "Wait a minute, that's a dog. Is this the same trail? That looks like a dog print." So, well done, Mickey, for not getting taken in. But yes, this is a dog, you could say, pretending to be a squirrel without the palm registering. Nicely done.
Can you speak to age? How do you tell how old? Like those look new, those look old, and the ones you just had on look new. But how do you verbalize that?
I'll just share that my teacher, Kirsty Lawrence, and many other evaluators in Cybertracker will tell you, the golden rule of tracking is know the age of your tracks. It is also one of the most challenging things because a track is not something that's permanent. It's the interaction of a paw or a hoof or fingers with the earth. And from the moment it's laid down, it's aging. Everything that happens, wind, rain, sun, melting in the snow, refreezing, all of this is going to weather that track over time. And depending on the substrate, a track that was made ages ago can still look fresh. Like my friends in Virginia that have really clay-like substrate, they say it's hard as heck to go trailing the deer and to find a fresh trail because a track that was made months back looks as fresh as the one that was made yesterday. In the snow, sometimes you got a better shot at it. Because, if you're tracking the weather, if you know when that last light snowfall was laid down, you can have a sense of, okay, we've melted, we've refrozen some of these deeper tracks that look fresh. You might actually feel and see, oh, they're iced in on the bottom. Oh, that's the sign that it was refrozen. That's not what a fresh track looks like. What does fresh look like? And what I recommend, based on what my teachers tell me, is every day when you go outside for a walk, go ahead and do what's called indexing. Put your own boot print in the snow, and then take a moment and take a good look and see, okay, are the tracks that I'm laying down right now with the edges of my boot print, are those crisp and clean? Or are those kind of fractured like they would be if it's really crusty snow? What's the kick up look like? What's the throw look like? If I'm walking along, is it nice and thin and powdery? Or is it kind of crusty and crystallized, kind of like larger sugar crystals? And is that falling into the track, so it's kind of caving in on itself? Or is it kicking forward and the track is quite clean? So those are the things to play with. But it really is one of those, there's no top to this mountain processes, which also makes it deliciously fun. You'll never get bored. Does that help? Awesome. All right. So let's continue our walk. So leaving the park, we're coming back and we see this along one of the driveway aprons walking down Pryor. So what I'd like to know is who's in this picture? And then did they interact? So who have we got here? Which species are here?
Is it bunnies and dogs?
Excellent. You've got 2 of the 3. We do have cocktail. And what was the last?
And squirrels?
Well done. 3 for 3, Caitlin. Nice job. Yes, indeedy. And then do you want to take a crack at the other one?
Mm. Oh.
So,
Is it a cat? No. I don't think we have that one in this thing.
yeah. Cat is not in this one, although that is a very round domestic dog track.
Birds.
The little teeny one on the right.
The little teeny one on the right. So the ones here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those, if you look back along that trail, see these as well?
Oh yeah, they're bounding.
Exactly. So who's that?
Squirrel.
Exactly right. That's a squirrel. Nice work. And so the other question, so can you tell whether they interacted? So what, this is a good question, because oftentimes when we see tracks together and they look roughly the same age, to Greg's point, because these all look kind of fresh. They're all like in freshly fallen snow. Cool. But sometimes we might conflate spatially together with temporally together. So were they there at the same time?
No, I don't think so.
Why?
Well, because they're continuing their trajectory,
Hmm.
at least to my eyes.
Excellent hypothesis. Well done. And anything else that you might call on for that?
Well, there's no like stopping and messiness of the tracks. They're just kind of moving forward or in their direction. You know, it's not like they're turning around or making a messiness. That's my theory.
Yeah, I love that, Allison. Well done. So yeah, so just calling that out. So we've got domestic dog over at the right with the pink arrow. We've got our cottontail moving along the middle with the blue. And then the orange arrows are calling out gray squirrel. And to Allison's point, the 2 animals that are prey animals that you would expect to change their trajectory, speed up, or really book it if there was a dog moving through, are just moving through on their natural trajectory. There's no evidence of change. There's no evidence of speeding up. And I'll add to that, there's no evidence of having sped up way over there and booking it. Every one of these bounds looks pretty normal for that particular animal. And when I say normal, it's just, if you think about animals in winter, they don't know where their next meal's coming from. Domestic dogs will be out there spinning zoomies, but our cottontails and our gray squirrels are looking at lean winters ahead. So naturally, they're going to conserve their energy. For them, a cottontail or a gray squirrel, that kind of bound is what you'd expect to see. It's their baseline gait. So evidence of normal gaits, that dog probably was not there at the same time as those other 2. So nice working it out, Allison. Well done. So turning back around, we've got a few more families to take a quick review on. So how about this one? Who are these related to?
This is the otters.
Well done, Manya. Can you speak to why otter?
Run, slide.
Yes. Well done. Yes. All right. So one
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So if you see a several inch wide trail that has a slide or a trough in the snow, odds are otter, hands down. Okay. Other things to note in terms of the mustelid family, which is who these are. So our otter, our mink, and our smaller weasels. So the middle here and the right pictures are pictures of otter trails. Nicely named. You've got that nice slide, and then the feet come back under and they're romping right along, or bounding, you might say. You can also see there are these 5 toes, front and hind. They're kind of a radially symmetric pattern. So it's a bit of a arc that they're in. And they tend to move in a bound, or like sometimes you'll hear lope, but in general, bound is pretty good. This lower one here, you can see the prints are a bit smaller. So these are 6-inch rulers I've got down. The upper ones, you're looking at like 2 to 3 inch long tracks, maybe 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches wide. The ones underneath are in deeper snow, but they're smaller. They're more like 1 inch, 1 inch long, 1 inch wide, also round, moving in this bound. So the hind's landing on top of the front. So it's only 2 impressions per set of 4 tracks coming through. This is characteristic for your mink, about 1 inch in terms of the diameter of those tracks. And again, doing 2x2, sometimes 3x4 bounds through snow, and moving quite through twisty areas as well. So continuing along, how about this family?
There's some deer in there, yeah, or moose.
Sure are. Well spotted. And what are our larger deer relatives, Allison?
Anyone else?
Phone a friend is totally legit.
Elk.
Well done, elk. Yep. And if we're going to the Northwoods,
Moose.
nicely done. All right. Well done, y'all. Yes. So what we have, lower left, these are elk or wapiti. You will not find them roaming wild around Matt Groveland for certain. These were actually taken from a small population that's been established in the middle of Wisconsin near Cable. There's another smaller population down near Black River Falls. So it's a good place to go tracking. If you're curious about elk and their behaviors, it's fantastic. You can track around the national forest there. So that's examples of elk or wapiti. The upper left and the middle are deer, straight out of, I think, Fort Snelling and Crosby Farm Regional Park. And then to the right from the Gunflint Trail, we have this beautiful set of moose tracks. So almost, salad to dinner plate size. Couple of things to note in terms of thinking deer. One is you will often see dew claws register, like these 2 little apostrophes underneath that beautiful little heart-shaped print that you see in that middle track. These are toes 1 and 4 of the deer structure. And please excuse my my cat who's decided to become musical on the piano if y'all are hearing that. On the right, you can also see another feature that you'll often see in deer and other cervid trails, which is that beautiful trailing of the cleaves moving into that next hoof print. You can also see it in a bit of a different form in the upper left here with that deer trail. Clear? Right. So let's apply what we know then. So let's say you're out with me and we're down in Crosby Farm Regional Park. And, because it's not as much fun to be on the trails, that's not where the wildlife are. I've dragged you around behind the brush. So as we look at these 2 pictures, there's that wall of brush. On the other side of that is the main walking trail. So we're looking north-northeast right now. Behind us is that fairly open floodplain forest. And if we looked even further, we might even see a hint of the Mississippi River. So interpreting the behavior here, who is this? And what are they doing here?
Was it members of the cervid family coming in and laying down?
Yes, it was. Do you want to take a stab at which members of the cervid family? Who do we have around here?
I Well, deer is my
Exactly.
guess. Yeah.
Yep.
White-tailed deer.
Exactly. Yeah, the only ones that we'd find at Crosby Farm Regional Park would be our white-tailed deer. So yes. And how do you know it was a deer?
Well, you're just talking about that dragging bit with, I didn't really totally understand what that was, that what they're dragging. Is it part of their toe?
Yes. So their hooves are separated. So let's see, going back here. So you see on this middle picture how there's
Yeah.
that heart shape right there in the
Mhm.
middle. So these are the two toes, what are called cleaves, of each one of the deer's feet. Okay.
Okay.
So each hoof has those two cleaves. They can splay apart, but they come to a point at the end. And you can see even on this one how that kind of drags out because again, they're conserving energy just like everyone else in the winter. And so what's dragging there are those two tips of the cleaves. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yes.
So it's a leading edge. Yeah. And then Allison, you're exactly right. What we've got here is a body print from this deer. And so taking a look a little bit deeper at this as well. So we can, if I don't accidentally forward us, is we can actually see not only that the trail's leading in and out, but we can also see looking closer at this bed on the right, you can see this dog leg here. You see that little chick in of the snow? That right there is the hind leg of the animal. So over the left side is where the hind legs are. The bum is towards the brush. The back is right here along this longer edge. So the animal is going to be able to look right at me if it were in that bed. It would be able to see the photographer, so the two of us walking up on this bed. It can also see towards the left side of this picture. A couple notes about this. So why would they lie down like this? Well, turns out deer will actually bed down with their walls to a back of brush. So anything that comes through that after them is going to make noise, which gives them plenty of time to sneak away. And they can hear every dog and person moving along that trail on the other side of the brush. So with their ears, they've got radar dishes picking up on everyone. And then they have a line of sight everywhere that's not covered by their hearing. So by following a deer's trail, we can pick up that about the animal. And then finally, last alphabet for today. Which family do these two animals belong to?
Is that a cat?
Yes, indeed. And which kinds of cats, Caitlin?
A little house cat?
Yes, you're right. That is a house cat on the left with that adorable tiny track. That's actually from my backyard. Not my cat, but from my backyard.
Amazing.
So what's a slightly larger cat that we might see if we went into the North Woods of Minnesota or east to Wisconsin?
A lynx?
Lynx.
Oh, excellent guess. This is not a lynx, but an excellent guess. Lynx will tend to have much more furred tracks. So similar to the red fox that we saw a while back, we won't see the toes quite so clearly in most snow substrates. Lynx, I think, will also be slightly larger than this particular track because remember, they're chasing after snowshoe hare. They need snowshoes just like the hares do. So for lynx. So smaller than a lynx, larger than a house cat size.
A bobcat? Is that a lynx?
This is a bobcat on the right. Yeah. So slightly larger, but you can see the similarity of those adorable toe beans. And then it's a bit harder to see on this one because this was in such kind of deep and fluffy snow that the snow kind of fell in. And also this on the right is a double register. So the hind is coming in on top of the front track. So the clearest track there that you're seeing is the hind and the toes coming in. Okay.
Amazing.
It is super cute. And it is super awesome. So thanks, Caitlin. Nice work. So, oh, yep, and there we are. So just a couple notes about your felids. So those first two tracks. And then in terms of regular, you're just thinking about the sentence structure again. In terms of regular movement, in general, what you'll see is either direct register walks or overstep walks, where the animal's hind will land in front of its front track. You can actually see this on this domestic cat track trail here at the bottom left, where this is the front track and this is the hind track. Toes are pointing that way, so the front lands and then the hind is landing just slightly in front every time both sides register. Make sense? And then on the right here, similarly, we have a double register of a bobcat. So well done, y'all. And so to close, I'd like to bring you along with me, reading the landscape for one story in the snow for a bit longer. So this particular bobcat print comes to us from Forest Lodge. In mid-November of last year, right after Kirstie Lawrence spoke to y'all, a group of trackers from the Minnesota Wildlife Tracking Project were out with her at a trailing workshop near Cable, Wisconsin. So Forest Lodge is part of Northland College. It's on the map here from Onyx Hunt. Thank you. And it encompasses 872 acres and includes several historic buildings where folks can stay. So we were staying in the gatehouse, which is located right here, where you see Forest Lodge Road. As we headed outside that morning to see what nature provided in the beautiful, nice dusting of snow, one of our group noticed this track in the snow right outside the shed. And who's that? That's our bobcat. So we immediately fanned out to follow its trail and see how it approached that shed and where it went next. So here's the inset. And our explorations turned up some really interesting information, which is that bobcat had approached the shed from the north, walked along this shed space right here, and you can see the picture to the right, so that beautiful little direct register trail. And then it crossed the path and came up to where we were staying and walked along the walls of the gatehouse. And its trail went right into the window wells alongside that wall. So we were pretty jazzed and we said, okay, where to go next? Glad you asked. After it completed its check of the window wells, it returned northwest, moving along this road, and then cut across to another building on the grounds. So this up here is called the Cow Palace. It was formerly the milking building for the dairy cows that used to be on the property. Above that is the old cow pasture nearing the lake. So the bobcat comes over to the Cow Palace and moves right along the side of that wall. And as we followed along the western edge of the Cow Palace, we noticed a section where the bobcat broke its usual walking pace, which is seen at right. So what happened here, folks? Trackers?
Did it find something to eat?
Excellent guess. So do you see this little trail here with very small tracks? What is that indicative of? Who are our tiny track makers?
Mice.
Mice and voles. So right here, we've got a little run by little small mammals who are hanging out under the snow. You can see that little snow tunnel. So they're hanging out in what's called the subnivean layer, which is a bit warmer than the environment right above the snow. So we have the bobcat that crouches just like a house cat, just checking it out, sniffing, watching to see if anything moves. And then notice there's this gap. So the way that we interpreted this was a crouch, intent on that small mammal trail mid-photo, and then it looks like there was a jump. But we weren't sure if that pounce actually succeeded or not, because we don't see any blood. Oftentimes, if an animal will take blood, sometimes you'll see a speck or two. But we aren't sure. But for what it's worth, we thought the pounce might have been a failed attempt. After this, the animal continues walking, hugs that north side of the building, and then strikes that northeast along into the deeper snow, kind of cutting around this area of taller grass. At the fence post of the cow pasture right here, at where the trail becomes blue, she turns west, and we notice something rather odd about the next stretch of trail, which, here's the picture, the broad view of the snowy path between the tall grasses. Oh, excuse me. With John helpfully marking out the trail with this yellow ruler. You can see these pairs of tracks right there. And then here is those pairs of tracks from above. Does this look like that walking trail that we were seeing earlier?
No, it's hard to tell for us. No,
Yeah.
it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not quite the same. The footfalls aren't even. What this is a side trot. It's usually seen in canids. And the funny thing was, we were flummoxed. None of us had ever heard of a bobcat in a side trot before. But as we were sorting this out, the overall track shape, that roundness, compared to, you can see a canid trail right below that. So we've got more round track shape. We've got a different stride length. It's clearly, so that basically distinguished it from the canid trails that we were seeing. Looked like fox tracks coming back the other way. And so just like reading the paper or reading a book, sometimes if you read the landscape, you learn something you had no idea could happen. The animals don't read the guidebooks. So here we are. We've now got a bobcat in a side trot. John's measuring the heck out of it for his future book and dissertation, and we continue on. So after that side trot trail, the bobcat turns north and wends its way through this fire pit area towards the wooded lake shore. And here's what that looked like. So we've got Kirsty on the left with that bobcat trail just barely visible over her shoulder, and then a close-up so you can see moving back into that walk and padding towards the lake shore. The bobcat then hugged the shoreline, pausing occasionally. And so a question for you trackers today, why might she have walked through this space?
Was she tracking whatever left those prints?
Yes, indeed. Do you have a guess on what left those prints, Caitlin? They're a bit larger than the last ones that we saw.
Are these squirrel tracks?
These are, yeah, squirrels.
Nailed it, y'all. Well done, Chris. Yep, these are squirrel prints. To our eye, they look kind of like maybe chipmunk. And you can also see these little fluffed up leaves here that look like someone dug up a cache of food. So we interpreted this as a small squirrel, possibly chipmunk. Hadn't been cold enough for them to go into torpor yet. But here we don't see a pounce. It looks like maybe there's a bit of a pause, but then it's an even trail continuing through. So she just kind of kept walking here. Maybe she sniffed. So that was right along here, that shoreline. After exploring the shoreline, the bobcat wended back through some thick brush into the field and then continued west, weaving in between these tall grasses here. Then things got a little interesting for us. The terrain shifted quickly to marsh, which was right around in here, where she crossed mostly lightly on the crust of the snow. We did not. There were some wet boots by the end of this day. We lost her in the marsh briefly. There were some crossing deer trails that were sinking down into that slush and just drew my eye more strongly than the lighter registers of the bobcat on the snow surface. Sometimes she didn't even register. But we were able to sort that out when we accidentally got on a deer trail based on that stride length. Deer have much longer legs than our bobcat. What we did find is that she leapt onto a log midway through the marsh and padded out to dry land, smart girl, and then continued up the slope here. The crazy thing is we only sorted that out by cutting for her trail, her tracks along the edge of the marsh here. And then we found one partial print, little toes, on a crusty swirl stamped snow on a log. Wasn't till she touched down on the snowy slope here that her trail became clear again. And as she continued up this slope, we got to see how she moved on the landscape. So not in straight lines, but curving with the terrain, checking things out. And occasionally we saw she'd leap up and over fallen cedar trunks like this one here, leaving perfect direct register paw prints. So you can see a double register there, double register over on the left. So just dunk, dunk, and over she goes. And we also started noticing multiple trails as the forest thinned out, at least one of which looked fresher than the one that we were following. And so we started speculating, okay, did this animal double back? Or is she being followed by a potential mate? It's getting towards that season. What time do bobcats start looking for dates? She finally crested the ridge of the peninsula here and then dropped down towards the far steep slope towards the western lake shore. And the west wind really picked up at this point. So we continued down onto that windswept slope. We noticed that the snow cover was a bit more patchy, it's interspersed with rocks, and the two bobcat trails we were now following often meandered onto large rocks that were just inside the lake. So the tracker that was on point at this point had a really tough time sorting this out, but was able to keep going, finding these occasional clear prints like the one that you see at the right, as the two cats wove through the cedars and rocks along the lake shore. And as that tracker followed the trail and we followed them, eventually the shore got so steep and narrow that us humans could not follow in the paw prints of the bobcats anymore without getting onto slippery rocks that were being crashed over by the windswept lake. So this photo at right looks out over Lake Garmisch, and you can see the prints of the cats on the snow-covered logs at the bottom here, evidence of their passing. This was right before we cut it and climbed up a steep slope. And then we continued paralleling the shore for a little while longer, just tracking at a distance, just trying to look down the slope and see, okay, can we see another set of tracks? Can we see a couple more prints? Finding more evidence to show us that the bobcats continued along that way. And so here's that whole trail from the very beginning at the shed and the gatehouse all the way to where we left the trail on the western shoreline of the peninsula. So y'all can laugh now. We covered a total distance of 880 meters for 4 hours on the trail. So this was not a fast hike. But it did leave us with countless questions. Among them for me were, how often do bobcats get this close to humans? Is she there because humans aren't often there? Or do we attract rodents? And that played into hunting habits. Okay, where is she going? What is she trying to hunt right now? Does that change at different points in the year? And how is she hunting it? How often is she successful? And then there's that side trash across the field. Is that something this bobcat does, or do others do it too? The multiple trails on the peninsula is another question, one individual or a pair. And then likewise, that comfort moving along the rocky, icy banks. None of us could have seen a coyote or another canid moving along there, but the bobcats handled it with ease. And then looking beyond where we couldn't follow the trail, where's their den site location? And how often do they come back and visit here? So if you're curious about this, you don't have to go to cable. All you have to do is go for a walk outside. And then relax your gaze. And when you notice a track, just ask yourself, what details do I see? Do I see other tracks in this trail? Where does it begin and end? And when you follow it, what does that tell you about the animal? If you have a mystery track, you can take pictures with a scale. Doesn't matter, centimeters or inches is fine. And remember, it's good to carry questions back to your reference books. It's also really good to go tracking with your friends. Or as we joke in the tracking club, you'll always be right. And what fun is that? There are just a few supportive resources I might mention. So we do have our Minnesota Wildlife Tracking Project. The website is here, www.mntracking.org. We also have an iNaturalist project that's specific to our sightings. iNaturalist is a free citizen science-focused social media program that is free to join and is entirely naturalist observations that is curated and responded to by skilled naturalists and trackers. And then if you have questions about tracks, you can post them to iNaturalist or send them to me. This is one of my favorite things in the world to do, and I'd be glad to reply. So naturalawarenessguide@gmail.com is probably the best way to get those to me. And then finally, if you'd like suggestions for guidebooks, because you're really keen to go out and do this on your own now, Animal Tracks of the Midwest, 2nd edition by John Popley. This is my go-to field guide. I always have it in my pack in the field. The other I'd suggest, Mammal Tracks and Signs, 2nd edition. This is a bit broader of a species list, but it's by Mark Elbrock. We joke about it being the Bible of our trackers. And shoot, if you're not going out on the snowshoe hike, or if that's on Saturday, come out and join us on Sunday. We'd love to see you. Our tracking club will meet at Fort Snelling State Park, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Sunday the 15th. And there are details at mntracking.org. We'd love to see you. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Fran. It has been a pleasure being here with y'all today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kirsten. That was great.
My pleasure.
I had a real quick question before we let Kirsten go. The side step that the Bobcat had done, how long was that track?
Great question. I think that was no more than about 30 meters, if that. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it saw something bigger than itself, like how a domestic cat, and I don't know how the similarities enough between the two species, but if it kind of arched its back and did that sidestep that way to maybe avert prey.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So what we picked up, because we had a group of about 6 trackers. And so while some of us were trying to work the trail, like you might have heard me say, on point. So there are a couple of folks that are working the trail up at the front, and then other folks will take a look and see, okay, is there anything else that might have influenced this animal's behavior? And we didn't find any other fresh tracks that would have pushed that particular animal. But what our hypothesis was, maybe it's just for that stretch of trail, it's just faster and easier to move in snow in that way. Our best guess, honest to Pete. But like I said, usually, we're used to just seeing that with canids. That's a energy conserving gait for canids. So yeah, more to come on that.
Cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great question.
And there was
I had a quick question too. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Maria.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say I had a quick question too, Kirsten. I was just wondering, that trail that you had mapped out, over the bird's eye view trail of the Bobcat.
Yeah.
Did you create that did you have a program out in the field or something, or did you recreate that afterwards, or how was that made?
Great question. So usually I have a program called Onyx Hunt that I use in the field, where you can start a track, and then it will just GPS locate you and create that little line on your own. I goofed. I didn't turn my phone on for this track, so I had to recreate this one. Thankfully, I had taken photos as I went. And as we were going, we're actually telling the story of the trail. Like, okay, now we're going north. Now we're going west. Okay, we're crossing the marsh. So it was actually quite fun to be able to recreate the lines from that bird's eye view. But I'd recommend Onyx Hunt as a way to map that. But Strava will work just as easy.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you, Maria. Thanks for joining today.
Did you have a theory as to how long how old those tracks were, or was he nearby, or she, I guess?
Yeah, great question. So looking at it, so this was fresh when we got outside about 8:30 in the morning. So our best guess was that this animal had come through within the last 6 hours. So sometime during the night. I don't think we'd had much wind in the night either. So unfortunately, as I was sharing earlier with track aging, it really helps you. It behooves you to pay attention to the weather. So if there had been wind, then we might have been able to tell to even a closer degree of, okay, maybe this was just an hour old, as opposed to, well, sometime within the last 6 hours. But without that additional wind, we go with the best hypothesis that we have. And then we try to continue updating that as we continue along the trail. So our best guess was animal passed within 6 hours of when we first got on that trail. Yeah, great question, Quentin, and thank you.
Real quick question.
Mhm.
Where was that location again for the Bobcat?
That was Forest Lodge, which is an educational campus that's part of Northland College. It's run by Northland as well as the Forestry Service. And the Rovers might have interest in checking them out for future programs. It's quite affordable if you rent the gatehouse, and it's got a lovely kitchen and living space as well. So
Cool.
I'd recommend it. And we're planning on going back there for another 10 days of trailing with Kirstie Lawrence again this coming November. So
Cool. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Great question.
There was a comment in the chat from Matthew.
Mhm.
Possible new tracking locating. If you've never been to the Bellwyn Conservancy, they have just opened a new piece of land at Afton where the Valley Branch Creek crosses St. Croix Trail.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Matthew. I have not been to the Bellwyn Conservancy, and I'm adding that to my list right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was
My
such a
pleasure.
great story to listen to.
Thank you so much, Sue. Always a pleasure to come and speak with the Minnesota Rovers. So I look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing y'all again. And until then, happy tracking.
Thank you.
Thank you.